folks. Welcome back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers, live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Now, before we get into the class, though, I wanted to do a minor bit of damage mitigation over a statement that Rabbi Coffman made last week during his Noahide class, and that had to do with the question of B'nai Noach going before three rabbis and getting a certificate for making a declaration before three rabbis. Rabbi Coffman had made the statement that it was as good as tissue paper, and he and I have had some back and forth conversations all week long on the question about the positives and the potential. And I am never going to argue with Rabbi Coffman when it comes to halakha. I mean, that's a losing battle, and I wouldn't dare do that. But I respect him so much that I'm willing to hang in there, discuss both sides of the matter, and try to show that there can be some positive aspects to growing B'nai Noach globally and keeping their connection under the rabbis through the rabbinic leadership in Israel and all the way up their hierarchy. Rabbi, don't you think that comment was just a little bit harsh?
It's always a pleasure to be here. Everybody knows, or if you don't know, you'll find out, or you find out otherwise. Someone spliced the video, that I gave,
yes,
I don't know, a week ago or more, that basically, calling out, Asher Mesa and Kola Kowalski about different things, false things that they've done, and whatever his name is, about going to a drive-in and watching this monster mash. So he claimed, I'm just going to throw this out there, that he didn't drive there, he was camping out there, so he didn't really desecrate Shabbos by being there. And who says people can't go away for Shabbos? So I'll call a spade a spade. So maybe that was true, right? Maybe I got the information wrong, right? So on that, I'll admit. So if he didn't drive there and he was camping out there, who says you should be camping out at a place to watch a movie in Shabbos clothes? Even if you didn't desecrate Shabbos, isn't that something disgusting in God's eyes? You didn't do anything technically wrong, but I would ask the $1 million question: of being drawn close to God or further away? Right? How is going, going to a place, camping out there, and watching movie or a bunch of movies, that's enhancing your Shabbos. I don't know any mainstream rabbi is going to say that's a good thing. But, my beef was that someone's bragging about that. I think that's a problem. I'm going to stand by what I said. That's a problem, right? And even if you didn't desecrate Shabbos, it's still a problem. Being disgusting in God's eyes. So let's go back. The end of last week, I'm going to mention this in my class for Noahide Nations tomorrow, right, as well. And that is, the end of the class, I spoke about different terminology. What's a Ben Noach, a Bat Noach, the Hasidei Umos Oilam, the righteous of the nations,
yes,
etc. Hasidei Umos Oilam, whatever you call them. And we mentioned also about this idea of a Ger Toshav. Now, what's a Ger Toshav? A Ger Toshav is an non-Jew, lives in the land, denies idolatry, right? An alien, right? Lives in the land of Israel. And the Rambam states clear, all right? Let's make no mistake. The Rambam states clear in the book of Kings, chapter 8, halacha 10, over there, that he says that if someone is going to be a Ger Toshav, and he says clear a Ger Toshav, they have to go in front of three people. They have to make a declaration. It doesn't say by a Noahide. It doesn't say that. Not my Rambam, not any Rambam.
Yeah.
It does not say that. So nobody can make the claim and say that refers to a Noahide. It doesn't. That's the first thing. So if that's only talking about a Ger Toshav, so we also mentioned what about a Noahide? Does a Noahide have an obligation to go in front of a rabbinical court and declare that they are a Noahide? What's the answer? No
obligation.
Halachically, there's no obligation.
100%.
Now, halachically, there's no obligation. So maybe there are opinions that say they should do it. But again, it's at best, it's if you want to do it, fine. It's not obligatory. Not obligatory.
But it can aid in growth of the Noahide.
Maybe it's a good thing to do. So I mentioned there that if someone wanted to do it in front of a witness, they could do it. I do think it's a good thing to certainly verbalize it.
A commitment,
right?
Sure.
When you verbalize something, we mentioned many times, it has a lot more meaning.
Sure.
Right? But then, okay, maybe I got a little bit carried away. And I said, if you put it on a plaque and you make it look really nice, the writing that's on this thing is really not worth the paper it's written on. Why do I say it's not worth the paper it's written on? It's not worth it because there are no halachic ramifications. Nobody, there's no obligation. The Noahide World Center will tell you, there's no obligation to do this. Now, someone will say, but to me, it's worth it. To me, myself, and I, all three of us, it's definitely worth it. Why? Because it makes me feel good. It makes me verbalize it. It makes me go in front of rabbinical courts. It makes me have a connection to rabbis, etc. That is worth something. I'm not going to say that's not worth anything, right? The more, if a person feels that because no one wants to deal with them, rabbis don't want to deal with them, communities don't want to deal with them, non-Jews don't want to deal with them, I get it. It's a lonely existence. We're trying to change this. Noahide World Center is trying to change this. Rabbi Chaim Coffman's trying to change this. Noahide Nation's trying to change this. We're trying to do a lot of things here. Right? Now, if someone were to say, I want to do it because it makes me feel good, is there anything wrong with that? Now, there's nothing wrong with that. They're allowed to do. I didn't say they're not allowed to do it. But there are
clear lines, and I keep reiterating this to B'nai Noach. There are clear lines.
One of my personal pet peeves is that people want to do more than what they're obligated to do.
Right. And now, you've been very clear. No Shabbos, no tefillin, and no bris
Right.
milah.
And I'm going to discuss this in my Noahide classes. Right. I don't want to digress, but the point is you're not going to straddle both.
No.
Now, if someone donates money, you want to make a plaque, put it up for them, right? So you're acknowledging they're helping you. You're acknowledging that. Now, if they want to get a plaque from from the Noahide World Center, and they're acknowledging, that you stand in front of a basin, etc., fine. Is there an obligation? There's not an obligation.
Right.
Not an obligation.
Nobody's ever. I don't believe anybody's ever said it was an obligation.
I'm not saying anyone did. I just want to point out all that does is it makes someone feel good. Now the question is, does someone really need to feel good to do that? Right? So you could argue, I'm being tossed around.
Oh, Rabbi, I have seen B'nai Noach that want to wear kippahs.
By Jews. I don't have a community. I only do these things virtually. I understand it's a lonely existence. Like someone who became a Noahide somewhere in the middle of nowhere in Texas, 3,000 people population, and he lost all his friends, all his social meetings and all that. Yeah. Why? Because everyone was involved in the church. Everyone's involved in the church. He said, but I'm not going back. Right. I can't go back to the church. So he lost everything. I get it. I tried to give him strength as much as I could, right? etc. But, okay, there's no turning back. So I understand it's a lonely existence. I definitely understand that. No community support, maybe no Jewish community support.
The whole point is to grow communities.
Right, that is the point, right? But again, if anyone's going to tell you they have an obligation to do this, they're lying, right? One of my personal pet peeves, I can't stand people lie or mislead, right? So here, if they write it on this piece of paper, they make this declaration, the rabbis sign it, there are rabbinical authorities hold, you can do that. I wouldn't say it's a majority, by any stretch, So my question was, why would you do it? There's no halachic obligation. The reality is the paper it's written on, that's what it is. It's not something of value per se that has halachic ramifications, but someone will come to you and say, someone will come to me and say, you know what? But it makes me feel good. It gives me credibility for what I did, what I believe in. It makes me stronger as a Noahide. Okay? I'm not going to say that's not worth anything. But I want people to understand, and I want to make clear. We're not starting, a Noahide religion, right? We're not going past boundaries that we shouldn't go past. So even if there even if they're, are, rabbis that say it's okay, right? The vast majority are going to say not that way, but fine. You don't become a heretic. You don't lose your portion in Olam Haba in the next world if you do it, right? No one's going to say that.
But it doesn't punch your ticket either, right?
Yeah, but if it's beneficial and you get something out of it, fine. My claim, which probably, was a little bit too strong, maybe, right? My claim was it's not worth the paper it's written on. Why isn't it worth the paper it's written on? Because it has no value. It has no value,
no academic
in
value.
In Jewish law. There's no ramifications. Someone who wants to take that, they get on a plane, they come to Israel, and they say, look, I got this certification. It's not a certification. It's not a certification. It's a nice letter. It's a nice thing that somebody did, right? But the reality is that I mentioned also my Noahide class. I mentioned that a non-Jew is not necessarily going to do anything if it doesn't affect them, if it doesn't benefit them, right? By the laws of kashrus, I mentioned that. Because a non-Jew, if whatever they eat, forget about the bats in Wuhan, whatever they eat doesn't affect them. So one of the commentaries in Leviticus chapter 11 says clear, if it doesn't affect you, then why are you going to keep kosher? So these stupid Noahides are going to say, I'm going to do it anyway because I can do it. Because I'm going to bring the Rambam, and the Rambam says, any mitzvah I do, I get credit. But says this commentary, why would a non-Jew do anything if it doesn't benefit them? Right? And that's why I said it's not worth anything over here. Because, in my opinion, it doesn't benefit. I don't see the benefit. But Dan's going to say, others are going to, ram it down my throat, and they're going to say, but it is beneficial. It's psychologically beneficial. Okay? I'm not going to argue that point. It can't, if it's psychologically, it helps a person, then they should do it. But understand that halachically it has no ramifications at all. Right? That's why I said, I wanted to make my...
I really am thankful to get to know you, Rabbi Coffman, and trust that you know your halakha more than most. And, it's always a joy to have, both sides of the scale of a matter, clear for people to understand.
So again, it could be worthwhile to people. And even this commentary would agree that if it's a benefit, then they should do it. Right? They're not going outside their boundaries because it benefits them. Right? There's a benefit by kashrus, doesn't benefit them. Because there's no negative effect by eating non-kosher. As far as we understand. By them, because we see they don't die. They don't die eating pig and eating all kinds of stuff. Right? They don't die. We don't see that. So if it's a psychological... You're right. It'll catch up to you eventually, right? But in the end, if it's a psychological thing,
Rabbi Sandra, your student Sandra here, she's made the point. She says it sounds similar to Jewish women that want to take on men's mitzvahs.
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with what they're doing over here. We're not saying it's forbidden for them to do.
Right.
It's a difference of opinion whether they have to or not. The opinion that says they should do it, they're only saying it's a good thing for them to do. They're not saying you're obligated to do it. The only obligation, again, which was misquoted, the only obligation to do it is if it's done in the Jubilee year. If it's done in the Jubilee year, which doesn't exist today, and it won't exist till after the Messiah comes, most likely, because there are different issues. If that is the case, then that only applies to a ger toshav. A ben Noach is not a ger toshav.
Right.
Let's not make a mistake. A Noahide is not a ger toshav. End of story. If that's the case, then that doesn't apply. Now, you want to tell me the rabbinical authorities hold it does apply. They could do it. Fine. I'm not saying they can't do it. My argument is, what's the benefit? What in the world is the benefit? So if you want to tell me the benefit is psychological and it makes me feel better, we're not saying you're not overstepping your boundaries. Right? And I want to make clear that I don't want people overstepping boundaries. I'm going to speak about why they can't keep Shabbos, why kashrus doesn't apply, why other things don't apply, right? So this may not be the case. That's not necessarily overstepping boundaries, right? But my question was, why would anyone want to do it? What benefit is there? So now I heard a lot of people got offended because they say, what do you mean? It's a tremendous benefit. It's a psychological benefit. Okay. But I just want to make sure people understand.
There's no
even if it's
benefit.
a psychological benefit, understand all this is a piece of paper signed by 3 rabbis. Just understand that's what it is. And it has no halachic ramifications. And if you're fine with that, you want to do it. I'm not saying you can't do it, right? But I am going to stick to what I said. And that is, outside of the psychological thing, what it's written on is not worth anything. In general,
Rabbi, this is why I so value this series, Pirkei Avos, is because it teaches people the whole behind the scenes ethics of the whole of most matters. If you truly understand what the ethics of the fathers teaches, you're going to get it, and the reason why you don't want to cross certain lines, because it may in fact cause issue. But today we're
and that's
getting
exactly
into
what it's done. There was a group out there a few years ago, and they're still unfortunately around, and they're crossing the line. They are well crossing the lines, causing all kinds of problems, leading people astray. We don't want that. Yeah. But in this case, that's not necessarily the case, right? They're not going to fry in hell forever for doing this. But I want to make sure that people understand, and it's clear, what the responsibility is and what this value is. So, if someone did get offended by what I said, understand.
Well, that's part of the tissue paper generation, Rabbi. They get offended at every little thing.
You're right. But you have to understand what it's written on doesn't have any validity for anything. It only has validity for making a person feel good, about their commitment to being a Noahide. Now, as we said before, people may say, well, to me, that's worth it. Okay. And if that's worth it to someone, they should do it. 100%.
But it's no more valid than an invalid conversion, is it?
An invalid conversion is worse. An invalid conversion is someone who converts for the wrong reason, or if they convert, then they go off. They never really meant it, right? This, is something better. At least they're making a declaration of truth. What happens if they go against the Noahide laws afterwards? They make this declaration. I'm not going to steal. I'm not going to do this.
Clear before Hashem that they're accepting the ramifications.
Right. So they could also technically have that revoked. But you know why it's not going to be revoked? Because it's meaningless. In different ways, it doesn't have any, it's not like, I wrote a document and I had 2 witnesses sign on it saying that I owe money to somebody else. Now, if I don't pay that money back, that person's going to come to me and say, hey, you owe me the money. I can say, I never borrowed money from you. And he pulls out the document. Now, if I don't pay the document, if I don't pay the money, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is the one I owe the money to is going to go to the 2 witnesses. It's going to say you have to pay. Right? That's a whole different story. Then I'm not upholding what I said I was going to do. Right? But over here, and if a Noahide signed a document, they make this declaration. They're going to be liable whether they make the declaration or not. Right? That I want to make clear as well. It's a good thing to make a declaration. I'm not going to say not. But even if they didn't make the declaration, are they still de facto a Noahide? Still de facto a Noahide. Right? That doesn't change. That doesn't change. Now, if they go against the Noahide laws, does it really matter if they signed in front of a rabbinical court or not? You think the rabbinical court's going to take action against them? Never.
No, but I think Hashem's definitely got something.
That's a different. I'm not arguing that. What I'm arguing is whether they put it on a piece of paper or they don't put it on a piece of paper. The ramifications are the same. It could be maybe in God's eyes. I'm not playing God. I'm not putting on my George Burns glasses, my funny mustache, right? God can say, wait a minute, you made a declaration. Maybe making a declaration is worse, right? In God's eyes, as a moral imperative. But if you didn't make the declaration, it's just as bad. Maybe it looks a little bit worse because you signed a document. And now the rabbi signed. But the penalty is going to be the same. Penalty will be the same, right? So that just means what I wrote it on is a psychological thing. And it makes me feel good. And if it makes you feel good, by all means, everyone should go out there and do it. If I'm going to get 1,000 emails, right, or 1,000 texts going to say, Rabbi Coffman, I want to know, should I do this or not? What would my answer be? My answer would be, if you want to do it, you could. I would tell people it doesn't really matter. But if it makes you feel good, okay. You don't want to do it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that.
That's
Rabbi.
also okay. And then if someone would have put me in a
Noahide
corner.
World Center, I just wanted them to know, since, I've been with them for a number of years now, and that's how Rabbi Goldberg has described my involvement with them is I am with them. I don't work for them. I am with them and working with them. And so I just wanted to clarify some of that. And thank you so much, Rabbi, for all you do
so the
share.
only other thing the only other thing I was going to say is that if someone would box me in a corner and say, but if I really write this, I make this declaration, 3 rabbis sign on it, what's it worth? I'm not going to change what I said. It's not worth the paper it's written on. You want to think it's worth something? Okay. It makes you feel better? Okay. I'm not going to, if someone's going to come to me, they want to do it, that's fine. And if they feel better about it, that's great. I'm not gonna say, well, you can't be my student if you do that.
Yeah, there's no academic or halakhic advantage to such, and it's never
right.
It's never portrayed.
And that was my point. I wanted to make a point that the paper it's written on. It's a psychological thing. It's not something that's something tangible, right? And again, maybe in God's eyes, I would say, if a person makes that declaration and signs, maybe it's worse, right? But if there are no halachic ramifications, right? Let's understand, if there are no halachic ramifications at all, it doesn't matter if I made the declaration or not. It's only psychological, right? So, if that's what people want to do, okay, right? If they don't want to do it, it's also fine, right? But the only people that would need to do it in front of a rabbinical court, according to everybody, that there's an obligation, is the status of a ger toshav. And the status of a ger toshav does not exist. Doesn't exist today. And it won't exist till the Messiah comes, most likely. Right? So that's the obligation. Right? Certainly according to the Rambam. Others may say that for a non-Jew to do it as a Noahide, fine. Right? I'm not gonna say it's a consensus. Not necessarily the consensus, but you have who to rely on to do it. Makes you feel good. Okay. So I guess we'll leave it at that.
So today we're holding on chapter 2, Mishna 8, part 5.
Part 5, right. It's gonna be a part 6, part 7, depending where all this goes. Right. He used to say the more flesh, the more worms, that we spoke about. And we're speaking about the more possessions, the more worry. Right. So now we would say it's pretty much self-explanatory. It's pretty self-explanatory. The more possession the person has, the more they're going to be worried, how they're going to keep it. You're not going to have any value of life over here, so to speak, because they're too worried. How they're going to keep their money. Stock market goes up, stock market goes down, and they're always worried. It comes along Rabbeinu Yonah of Gerundi, famous Rabbeinu Yonah, explains, person shouldn't think that with all the honor that wealth brings, right? Because wealth brings a lot of things. It brings honor. It brings power. It brings a lot of things over, not necessarily everything that's good. And all the property that comes with a person, whatever he has, is going to lead a life of tranquility without any problems. Right? Now, we have to understand, we've mentioned before, you go back to the Declaration of Independence, right, of the good old USA. Declaration of Independence says I have the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, right? Also to property. Now, the founding fathers of America were Bible thumpers. They were Bible thumpers. Now, they wanted freedom from religion, people getting persecuted for religion, all this. So they wanted freedom to do whatever they want. Good. So now, if I have a right and I have the ability to acquire property, wealth, and all these things, does that bring happiness? Right? And that we spoke about a lot. And that you see by wealthy people, we mentioned by people who win the lottery, for instance. People win the lottery, most of them, their lives are ruined. Totally ruined. The vast majority, right? They win a ton of money. So we see that it doesn't necessarily bring bring a person to happiness. And most people that do have money, are mega wealthy, they're miserable, right? Immorality goes on with that. We're going to see that in the next part of the Mishnah if we get there, right? The more wise, the more witchcraft, right? The immorality brings all kinds of terrible things. All kinds of terrible things. So, it's good. Person has money, financially they don't have to worry. They pay off all their bills, go here, go there. They don't have to worry about how much they spend, within reason. But you would see most people that have, I would say, mega wealth. I don't think they're the happiest people in the world. Whether it comes to professional athletes, for sure. When it comes to movie stars, as we would say, Beverly Hills Billies, right? Movie stars, swimming pools, right? Does that, if you see like how many times they get married, and different things, all kinds of issues, doesn't bring happiness, right? Totally doesn't bring happiness. So it doesn't mean the more possessions, the more I'm going to have a life of tranquility.
No.
Right? Most likely that's not the case. Most likely it's just the opposite. They're out partying, they're out this, they're out that. Doesn't bring them happiness. Right? That's why, today, most people are on Prozac, because they don't do well in this world. They don't function that well for any number of reasons. Right? Wealth could be one of them. Right? But life is hard. Life is, we go through the school of hard knocks. It's not easy. But people would think, if I had more money, I give more money to charity. Right? I remember someone asked the rabbi this question once. They said, should I work extra hours in order to give more money to charity? And what's the answer to that? No. You give whatever you can give. The more you work, doesn't matter. You're not obligated to work more to give more to charity. You give what you can give. You work what you have to do. We mentioned, again, many times, that, when you're not done working, you have to deal with your family also. But the guy has to learn. He has to go out to learn. The spouse has to, the wife has to send him out. At least, an hour, a couple hours, whatever it is. That's what he has to do. Right? Because he got an obligation to sit and learn Torah by a Jew. So that's the only permissibility to work. Because when you're not working, you got an obligation to learn. Now, there has to be a balance. You have to see your wife and kids, to a certain extent. But you also have you have an obligation to learn. So then there's a fine line. How do you know what you're doing for work is really helping you work? You can say, well, I have to work extra hours because competition, because of this, because of that. Now, what if God himself says, after 120 years, you could have learned all this extra time? So what are you talking about? I was busy. I had this promotion, that promotion. And what is God going to show? God can show beyond the shadow of doubt. You just wasted time over here. This had nothing to do with your business. Right? You may thought it did, but I find out that it was a total waste of time. So, a question I got last week or a week and a half ago is, how do I know how much effort I'm supposed to put in? Right? And this is a major serious question here.
Sure is.
Because, because at the end of the day, right, a guy gets married, a Jew gets married, he signs on the ketubah, on the marriage document. He's got to provide his wife with clothing, food, a house, conjugal relations. He's got to provide. He's going to provide for his wife. Now, if he's got to provide, so he's got to find a job. He's got to do something. He's got to make money. Now, he might have to work all kinds of hours, different things. But again, in order to support a family, right, you're going to have to work over here. But that's the only permissibility where you're exempt from learning Torah. In other words, you're going to work all day, fine. You work from 8 to 4, 9 to 5, whatever it is, 9 to 6. After that time, you unwind a little bit, you come home, you eat something. Your obligation now as a Jew is to learn. That's your obligation for however long. Your wife has to send you out to the study hall. That's the only permissibility, right? Otherwise, what's the issue? Then you're over a Torah prohibition of not learning Torah when he could have learned. But they're going to say, how much effort do I have to put in? So I just saw something earlier today. that,
Mm-hmm.
the Rebbe says that sometimes we may put in too much effort. We may work too hard when I don't have an obligation to. Now, it could be the evil inclination trying to convince us, really, I have to help my wife more and this and that. There's a limit. There's a limit over here. What a person has to do. So there could be serious ramifications. So therefore, you're right. I have to put my best foot forward. We can't rely on God for everything and say, no, I'm just going to sit and learn all day. God's going to provide for me. We're not on that level. Right? We mentioned a number of times also, there's a difference of opinion between the Chovos Chavavos, duties of the heart, and the Gra, the Vilna Gaon of blessed memory. Duties of the heart says, you got to put your best foot forward. Right? You put your best foot forward, no guarantee, but that's what you have to do. Comes along, the Vilna Gaon, he says, if you rely on God for everything, you don't go to doctors, you don't put any effort in to do anything. God will provide for you if you're on that level. But you have to be on that level. I know somebody that, puts his best foot forward minimally, and I mean minimally, and God takes care of his needs. Takes care of his needs. Right? Most people are not on that level. I wouldn't even tell people to do that.
No.
They're not on their level.
Dangerous.
They're totally not on their level. So a person can say, but, I want to learn more. Right? Someone came, I think I used this at the end of last week, I think, that someone came to Rabbi Yisrael Solanta, a blessed memory, head of the Musar movement, the ethics movement. Said Rabbi Yisrael Solanta, someone came to him. Someone asked him, what should I learn? I only have an hour to learn a day. 2 hours, maximum, let's say, to learn a day. Something like that. He said, what should I learn? So some people may say you have to learn Jewish law. You have to be proficient in Jewish law. Right? You have to know the laws of Shabbos backwards and forwards, laws of kashrus, other things. Okay. Some will say maybe you have to learn Gemara. Right? You have to go through the entire Talmud. Some will say other things. Mr. Salanter said, he said you have to learn Musa. You should learn Musa. If you have an hour a day, you should learn Musa. Right? It's a little bit strange. Why, I would think Jewish law, Gemara, maybe some other things, but why Musa? But the more Musa you learn, you'll find out you have more than an hour a day to learn. You'll find out you have a lot more time to learn.
Get honest with yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're honest with yourself, that's it. If you're honest with yourself, you'll see. You'll see how much you have, you'll see how much time you waste, and then you have more time to learn. Right? That was the reason. That was the reason he said that. So, so if that's the case, you'd say, well, maybe I should find a job to be able to, work fewer hours and learn more Torah. True. All right. Not so easy to find. All right. Definitely not so easy to find. But, there would be an obligation, for all you men out there, right? All you Jewish men out there, to find some sort of profession or something where, you can maximize the amount of time to learn. I'm not going to say it's an easy thing to do. Right. But, in theory, it should be, it could be done. So, back to what Rabbeinu Yonah here says. He says that don't think the more I'm going to have, I'm not going to have any tranquility. Right? That's all right. Then I'm going to have all kinds of tranquility here. And everything's going to be good. Because we see that's not the case. All you have to do is look out in the world and see people that have money and see how happy they are. Now, some could be more happy than others. I'm not going to say everyone is totally miserable. At the same time,
there's got to be a balanced equilibrium. Yeah.
There has to be a balance, which a lot of times there isn't. There's just, there's a lot of aggravation people have in life. Even if you have money, there's still, plenty of aggravation. Spouse, in-laws, kids, all across, all around. There could be issues. Now, another issue is, this person's going to be constantly worried the entire year, what's happening with their money? Is it going up? Is it going down? Right? Right? If you would ask rich people, that's what they would tell you. They're worried, they have a lot of money in the stock market. So what do they do every day? They're looking at their stock. It's up, it's down. They could have a heart attack left and right. Anyone's got money in the stock market, you have to have a heart of steel. Because if you're in for the short term, you're a toast. You got to be in for the long term, right, in general. But that's what they're going to tell you. They're going to be worried every second of every day to make sure that money's going to be there. And what would happen if the money's not there and, all these other things? Got to be careful, right? There are unscrupulous individuals, person give money to something, some investment, it goes sour, or a number of things, they'll have a heart attack over here, right? Yeah. So you got to be careful. They're gonna be worried all the time what's happening. Comes along Rav Dessler, a blessed memory. He was the spiritual mentor of the Panovich Yeshiva and in Gateshead, a blessed memory. So he explains that a rich person does not worry about his livelihood, but what? He worries that his wealth, but from his wealth, what's the issue? His wealth does not stop him from other issues, but worrying about other things. Why? Because the more a person has, the more wealth, what are they going to be worried about? Like we said, they're going to guard it to the best of their ability to make sure it doesn't get lost. Because someone, you take someone like Bill Gates. Bill Gates, I said many, many years ago, if an Orthodox Jew would be as determined to learn as much as they can, like Bill Gates is interested in making money, we all would have been Torah giants a long time ago. Long time ago, right? We don't have that drive that he does. He's got the drive based on a lie, based on a total lie. So if we understand the truth, but we don't have that drive, we don't have that same drive to be the best, don't sleep as much, learn as much as we can, keep going deeper, this, that. Because the reality is over here that a person got money, significant money, they don't want it to be lost. Yeah, they don't want it to be lost. There's also worry that is because they have this wealth and they have this money. What do they want? More. Who doesn't want more? A person has 100. The rabbis tell us, what does he want? He wants to make it into 200. You got 200, you want to make it into 400, right? You've seen this in the auto industry. Someone gets successful. Then what do they want? They want to be more successful. They want to be, they want to be at the, at the top of the totem pole, so to speak. I'll give an example. We'll give a football example. Vince Lombardi. Everyone remembers Vince Lombardi, right? Of Green Bay Packers fan.
Of course.
Vince Lombardi said, I finished second a number of times. Not the exact quote, but he said finishing second was like, it was like such a horrible thing. In other words, you get to the top and then you lose the game, right? You lose the Super Bowl, let's say. So he said finishing second is like, the worst thing could ever happen. Now, what's the problem? What's the problem with that statement? I understand you want to win. I understand you want to be successful. But at the end of the day, let's say there are 28 teams. There are 28 teams, let's say, in the NFL. I think it's less than that, but whatever. Let's say there are 28 teams. There are 28 teams, you finish second. That's pretty good, right? You finish 27 out of 28, right? That's like 93%, 94%, whatever it is, right? But you finish second. That's nothing to sneeze at. Now, I understand, there are dynasties out there. If they don't get to the playoffs and win, it's called a lost season. Well, that's not necessarily true.
Unlike the MLB, the major leagues, like Boston
if you look at it,
they won the American League East pennant.
Yeah, okay. But I'm saying, if you have teams that spend a lot of money, right? There are big teams out there spend a ton of money. They don't want to finish second. They don't want to finish third, right? If they're not supposed to finish in the top 5 and they do, so okay, that's a different story, right? They overshot what they were supposed to do, right? But if you finish 27 out of 28, that's a bad season. You ask the coach of the University of Alabama, right? You ask the coach of the University of Alabama, they've won 5 or 6 in the last 10 years or something like that. Unbelievable streak. Either they're in the final game or close to the final game, almost every year. It's like the Patriots. Everyone hated them. Why'd they hate them? Because they were always there. They were always in contention. But if you ask him, listen, you got to the final game. You ended up 11-1. You finished in the top 5 in the polls. Yeah, but you lost the main game. You didn't win the main game, right? So they'll pull the hair out. Yeah, I didn't win the main game. Most teams would be ecstatic to be in that position, especially if they've never really been there so many times, right? A lot of teams like to have that problem. But you want to tell me it's like it was a forgetful season? Now, if you're making big money, and the teams are spending a ton of money, you don't want to finish second. You definitely don't want to finish second. So what is their determination? Their determination is all the time we want to be the best. Now that obviously going to be injuries, going to be other things that are going to happen that won't allow that, right? But back to the idea of, Bill Gates, he's determined to be number one, right? He would work 14, 16 hours a day. He doesn't want to be number 2. Maybe his attitude has changed over the years. He doesn't want to be number 5. He wants to be number 1. He wants to be at the cutting edge, of his industry. Okay, but that comes at a price. So my point is that, he's doing things based on a lie. You're number 1, you're number 2, you're number 3, you're number 4. That's not what life is. I mean, that's what you make life out to be, but that's not real life. That's just saying, I understand. I want to be the best at my, at what I do. Professional athletes, I want a business. You want to be up there. You want to be number 1, whatever.
Yeah.
But you're going to put all this effort.
Wheel that never stops.
Right. It never stops. That's why, someone who told me was in business, a person owns a bunch of hotels and, has a lot of money, sat and learned for a number of years. And he said just the business, business just made him go crazy. Once it's part of you, it's hard to get out of it. Right.
Well,
so I said,
I use the hamster wheel analogy, Rabbi, because no matter how hard you work, you're not going anywhere.
You're right. Right. So I said, thank God, I was involved in business. That's all where my money came from. But, I used it for the right things. And I sat and learned, which most people probably never do. But even so, I didn't have that mentality. I had no interest. When I was involved in real estate, my interest was just putting food on the table. I wasn't interested in being number 1, being this, being that. If it could help me, retire earlier, other things, good. Then the whole market crashed. But that's my luck over here. But with all that, you're spinning your wheels. And then you get to the end of your life, what'd you have? You said, I was the 10th richest person. And I gave the business over to my kids. And look what I built. Look at the empire I built. So look at all the people who build empires. And I'm not going to downgrade them. Right? They worked really hard, maybe cutthroat, maybe they lied a bunch of times, squashed other people. Who knows? Who knows what, underhanded things people may have done, may not have done. So it's worth something, right? They built themselves up. Look at Levi Strauss. Look what he did. And other conglomerates, all over. People started with nothing. Business failed, started again, this thing, that thing. There is what to be said. But when you get to a certain point, right? Again, we're talking about wealth and the more possessed. When you get to a certain point, if you're an Orthodox Jew, right? Let's say, if you're an Orthodox Jew and not only you're making good money, you're making great money over here. Now, would I tell someone, okay, sell it, take the money, invest it, and that's it? Or, retire early, put someone else in charge? Person has to make a sensible decision. Right, but I would say if you have enough money, not just to live on, but for generations, and we're talking substantial money. And I didn't have substantial money. I had good money, but nobody. I don't know too many people. I really don't know anybody. Let's say, and that doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? But I don't know anyone who did the same thing I did, and I got flack for it. They said you should do something with your money, start a business, invest. I didn't want to do anything with my money. I wanted to learn how to support people. That's what I wanted to do. Making good interest. So why not? Now, how many people would have done that? I'm talking about in the Orthodox world. Now, sometimes, again, I'll cut people some slack. Sometimes you won't be able to do that if you got a big business. You can't just sell it off and retire in the sunset, right? Probably it's not going to work. Right? It depends. But let's say, someone had a chunk of money, a serious chunk of money, and it wasn't necessarily tied up in a business. If you're an Orthodox Jew, you should be giving a lot of money to charity, you should be helping others, and you should be sitting down and learning. That's what you should be doing. Now, again, when I had money, I got flack. I should be doing something with it. When I didn't have money, I should be doing more. I should be putting my best foot forward even more, trying to make money and recover and this and that. So I got hammered on both ends. I had people talking out of both sides of their mouth at the same time. So, in the end, I would have wished certain things would turn out differently, but they didn't. Okay. But my question is, how many people, if they have super wealth, how many people are going to take that wealth, use it for their own good, and be able to sit and learn? If they're an Orthodox Jew. Now, again, I know one other person, who had serious money. He did sit and learn, many, many years. But business drew him back in. I understand. But how many other people out there have done that? So you're going to say, well, that's an altruistic way of looking at the world. Maybe. Maybe it is. But what's my obligation as a Jew? As a guy, right? What's my obligation? My obligation is to learn the entire Torah. That's my obligation. To learn everything. To know it backwards and forward.
As a B'nai Noach, there's no obligation, right?
No, there's no obligation for that 100%. But you know what? If a Noahide had money, right? He should know where to invest it, i.e. supporting Torah, supporting Noahide things, etc. They also need to learn. They need to learn their laws. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with this Noahide class. Tomorrow, 2:30 Eastern time, 9:30 Israel time, right, on Noahide Nations. So we're going to teach people, A, how to be Noahides, and B, for them, they're going to have to pass an exam in order to be able to teach others. Right? So they have to learn their own laws. They have to know their own laws. But, as we always say, there are plenty of things for Noahides to learn. They can learn Tanakh. They can learn Chumash. They can learn Jewish law, what applies to them. They can learn Jewish philosophy. They can learn Musar, just like we're talking now. I could keep people busy, as I always say, for 250 years. That's not going to be an issue. So, they have an obligation to learn every second of every day? No, they don't. But there are a lot of things out there. And I gave this over on Tanakh Talk more than once. When I spoke about Noahides, etc. And that is that there are many things out there a Noahide should do based on a moral imperative.
Yes. Yeah, you've always stated that.
So, as Dan says, they don't have an obligation to learn all day. You're right. But they have an obligation to know their laws. And to know their laws, and they should know them well. But there's an obligation to know other things also. Does that mean I have to study, every second of every day? No. On the other hand, if they really understand what their purpose is, then, if they have the opportunity, and they have the means, then why shouldn't they be busy listening to classes for hours on end? What else should they be doing? Going to the Stampede in Calgary? What should they be doing? Watching the CFL? I mean, watching reruns of Laverne and Shirley? The Honeymooners? If I Love Lucy, what should they be doing? There are a lot of fun things to do out there. A lot of ways to get distracted. There's no question about it. Right? But, if a person has time on their hands, you're right. Coffman's going to say, you don't have an obligation to learn all day. Fine. So person, let's say, doesn't work on Sunday. You got Sunday free. What are you doing? Well, it's family time. Okay. But you don't need the whole day to be family time. Right? If you don't need the whole day, so what are you doing the rest of the day? I can play this scenario over and over again, make you Noahides feel like an absolute piece of dirt.
Oh, yeah. Anybody can guilt somebody. Sure.
Yeah, I'm good at that. Come on. I can make myself feel guilty as well for a lot of things. True. Right? What am I doing in this world? Right? What am I doing here? For everybody, we're created B'Tselem Elokim. We're created in God's image. If we're created in God's image, then I have to do whatever I need to do in order to connect to God. So by a Jew and a non-Jew, not exactly going to be the same because they can't learn the same things. But even if they don't learn the same things, it would make sense that a non-Jew maybe should keep in a lot of moral imperatives in order to do things that they're going to uplift their soul. Because if we said before that a person is affected by what they hear, they're affected by what they see, their ramifications could be catastrophe. It could be an absolute catastrophe because it becomes part of your psyche. When it becomes part of your psyche, it's harder to fight. By a Jew or non-Jew, there's no difference. So it's a question of what we see. It's a question of what we do, what we use our time with. Right? And we mentioned this before. It doesn't need to be repeated. Right? But I want to make sure people understand. They're living in this world. It's a hard world to live in. And the question is, every second of every day, I could ask the question: Am I doing what my service to God is? Am I fulfilling my obligations, or I'm not? So a non-Jew has less obligations, right? That there's no question. The issue is, what about their free time? In their free time, can they just do it? Can they do whatever they want? And the answer is yes, technically speaking. They have an obligation to learn a set number of hours a day? No. How are they going to learn the laws if they don't spend time learning? How are they going to become moral, upstanding individuals if they don't delve into the laws and they don't understand what their purpose is? They're not going to be able to, because life around them will dictate what is supposed to be. I'll give an example. I just read an article earlier today about someone in Manchester in England, and they had people had a child that during the birthing process didn't get enough oxygen to the brain. So doctors told them, not even going to make it through the night or whatever. And this baby lasted a long time, and they had to put the baby on, give the baby oxygen, etc. And basically, England has a lot of liberal laws, when it comes to medicine and all that. And they basically said, there's no point over here. Kids never going to change. And, we want to pull the plug. So the parents did whatever they could. They did whatever, they turned over everything in order to keep their daughter alive. Now, this person, one of them was an American citizen. So America, and also an Israeli citizen. America and Israel was willing to treat the child. Because in England, they said, let her go to hospice, try some other things, and they reneged on that. They fought to the high court there, and anyway, they lost. They lost, and they wouldn't extradite the child because of all these great liberal laws. So what did they do? They said, okay, we're going to put your child in hospice. You lost your final thing, and we're gonna pull out the tubes. Now, what happens when they pull out the tubes? Child dies, right? Child died. But they walked, and then it was a problem with COVID, so they couldn't have 10 Jews there, and do confession and do all these things because of COVID. And the parents want, it's horrific, watching their own child die like via Zoom. They couldn't be there, whatever, the whole thing. So now, why do I mention that? I mention that because for us Jews, preservation of life is worth millions. Every second of life, whether a person's suffering or not, they have the ability to sanctify God's name. Right now, who determines what is considered sanctity of life? Oh, the doctors do. They determine, this person, if they come out of it, they're in a coma, they're never going to amount to anything. This, they'll be a vegetable. Let's just end it now. We need more beds. The person's just taking up space. There are cases where, someone had cancer and they're basically, killing the patient, one of the children gets the parent removed from that hospital to a better hospital. It's going to help them. And the parent lives 20, the parent ends up living 10 more years. Healthy years. Know what the other doctor said. Right? Know what the other hospital was going to do. They would have killed her. They would have killed the mother straight away. Nothing to talk about. I mean, not directly, obviously, but they would have let the person just atrophy and die. Pretty much. So that's the liberalism that you're fighting against, you're fighting in the world. Now, as a Jew, we have tremendous obligation to keep personal life, unless it's forbidden, right? If it would be forbidden, that'd be a different issue. But if there's an obligation to keep somebody alive, right, that's what we have to do. So this family in England, they did whatever it took, and eventually they lost. The child died. Now the question is, how would that apply? How would that apply to a non-Jew? Right? Does a non-Jew have to go that far? Well, it's also sanctity of life. It's also sanctity of life for a non-Jew. Can't just let somebody die over here. Right? Can't just say, this person's got this, that, and the other thing, so we're not going to fight over here. Is it going to be exactly the same? It depends on the case. Right? We're not going to overgeneralize here, but it's going to depend on the case over here. But non-Jews have more obligations also. Even if the moral obligations don't necessarily apply. A non-Jew has to be close to God as well. They're created in God's image. Now, it doesn't mean it's the same. Doesn't mean they have the same obligation. But I would venture to guess, if somebody was married, right? Let's say someone was married. They are both Noahides, both going in the same direction, right? So they want to lead a certain life. It doesn't mean it's ownerless. People make the mistake, they make the mistake, it's only 7 laws, right? Maybe there are 12, 13 more laws that a non-Jew would do that's liable for a death penalty. Other things could be, rabbinic, transgressions, other things. But we're not opting over here to be mediocre. Nobody wants to be mediocre over here, Jew or non-Jew.
Right,
if that's the case, then they have a greater awareness. If they have a greater awareness, why in the world they want to be like Esav? Why do they want to throw everything away just based on desire? Now, the desire itself, may not lose their portion of the world to come, right? I'm going to make it easy. Let's say it's not something they're going to lose their portion of the world to come. But they could, this thing could spiral, and they could do things they don't necessarily want to do. Now, they may not be forbidden to do it, but the question always is, am I going towards God, towards spirituality, or am I going against? Which direction am I going in? Now, if I go in the wrong direction, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to spiral out of control. But what it does mean is that one thing could lead to another. We're going to see, one day in the next millennium, as the Mishna Pirkei Avos states, mitzvah goreres mitzvah, avera goreres avera. When a person does a mitzvah, he wants to do more mitzvahs. When a person transgresses, you go the other way. Right? You're either going one way or the other. There's nothing in between. So if there's nothing in between, then you have to see. A person has to take stock. They have to take stock of what am I doing today? Am I going in the right direction? Am I not going in the right direction? Mm-hmm. Before a person goes to sleep, right? That's what we call taking a cheshbon nefesh, taking a self-accounting. Did I learn as much as I could have? Were my interpersonal relationships good? Did I speak to others? Did I speak Lashon Hara? Did I do these other things? Right? Did I do what God wants me to do?
Yeah, but not without being neurotic though about it.
No, we're not talking about being. I can make you neurotic. I don't think anyone. What I said about tissue paper, I don't think people want me to make them neurotic either, right? But yeah, within reason. Because even if a person didn't do the right thing, as my Rebbe says, if you live in the past, you have no future, right? You can't drive yourself nuts at the same time. As the Chovos HaLevavos says in Duties of the Heart, we don't do a quarter what we're supposed to do. Now that's pretty depressing. Some people even less. Now, you can look at what you did today or the other day or a week ago, and a person can say, wow, I got real issues here. I don't want to get out of bed. I feel so bad. We should feel that bad. We should feel that bad. Why? Because we're living in God's world. Even though we messed it up. And if we're living in God's world, it's my relationship to God. I don't care what anyone else does around me. It's my obligation. And if I'm not upholding what I need to uphold, I'm in trouble. But I don't want to make myself feel so bad and say, well, why should I bother getting out of bed? I'm just going to do the same stupid things I did yesterday. Right? We don't want that. We don't want to beat ourselves up so we have no future. But at the same time, we have to be realistic. Right? And I hear this a lot, that people will say, I want to know the measure for measure. I want to know I have to go through this. And the reality is, there could be a million things that a person does on a daily basis that aren't necessarily so good. I'm not saying deserve a death penalty for, but they're important things. Blessings, prayer, interpersonal relationships. I could be here till tomorrow listing things. You won't get out of bed. You will not get out of bed, myself included. Because you feel like a piece of absolute dirt, which we should, but it shouldn't break us. 100% it shouldn't break us. I'm not saying we should blow it off, and say, okay, I knew I wasn't good today, so I'll blow it off. I'm not going to work on anything, and tomorrow's a new day. You cannot blow it off at the same time. You have to take it step by step. Someone say, well, at least I'm at the bottom. The only place I can go is up. Okay, that's a perspective. But you cannot say, well, I'm just at the bottom. Why bother? People say that. Yeah, people say, well, I've done this, I've done that.
Going to the garden to eat worms, yum, yum.
Right. I've done such terrible things. The Bible for death penalty, so why bother? I'm stuck over here. Not true. There's always repentance. But there's a perspective. Now, how many people are really working on themselves today? How many people are really thinking, okay, I have to be better. I have to work harder, etc. And they really feel bad. They just don't blow it off. There'll be people out there. I'm not going to say none. There will be people, that are really seriously working on themselves. There'll be a lot of people that won't. That'll just go through the motions. They'll do things by rote.
Rabbi, a big question a lot of Noahides have is, how do we know when Hashem's hand is, over us?
Well, what does that mean?
I mean, when somebody's, blessed, let's just say, how does a Noahide know when they are blessed for walking in service of Hashem?
Well, obviously they have to know the right thing to do. They have to know which path they have to go in. But they also have to learn, which is also important, is they have to learn the repercussions for their actions. Right? So, the question I've gotten, maybe it's an offshoot of this, or maybe the same, and that is, how do I know I'm doing what God wants me to do?
Yeah, more or less, yes.
Yeah, how do I know I'm going in that direction? Well, if you know what the Noahide laws are, and you understand what the Noahide laws are, and you're doing what you need to do, so you're going in that direction. What's a little bit, as the English would say, it's a little bit dodgy, right? If there be things that, are a little bit dodgy over here, and that they are problematic, let's say, or possibly problematic, then the question would be, maybe I shouldn't do it, because it's going to have a negative effect. I think people are honest enough that they know what's right and wrong. In general, right? I'm talking about if they're holding.
They haven't accepted their own choices often, though.
I know, but there's another issue. Even if they know according to the Torah what's really right and wrong, aren't we the best at justifying what we do? We're going to say it's not so bad. Most people are doing worse things. That may be true. But you see, after 120 years, God's not going to ask Dan Barwell. He's not going to ask him, hey, you weren't like, how come you weren't like the prophets? God's not going to ask that question. He's going to say, okay, this is what you did in your life. I'm going to show you a second movie, as the Zohar says. I'm going to show you a second movie. What's the second movie?
Potential.
The second movie is what you could have done, what your potential was. The first movie, you see, as anyone had not a body experience, will say the same thing, Jew or non-Jew. They see their life flash before their eyes. Every last thing that they've done, all their thoughts. And now God says, okay, this is what you did. You can't deny it, because just like we're recording now, you can't deny it. So then God says, okay, I'm going to show you what your potential was. You said you didn't have time to learn. You were too busy. Let's play the 365,000 hours of CFL that you watched. You can say, but God, I don't understand. That was only a moral imperative. I wasn't obligated to learn Torah then. God says, but there's 365,000 hours of wasted time. And I'm being generous, right? So someone's going to answer, but, why wasn't that ever I taught that? God says, God can say, well, maybe it's not explicit in the Noahide laws, but isn't it true? Isn't it true that, we waste time when we shouldn't? And probably during that time, you could have found time to learn something or try and improve something, right? Now, if you're busy with the spouse, dealing with your kids, this, that, there's always room to grow in that also. But if you're busy, then I don't have an obligation to learn. If I'm busy, I don't have an obligation to other things. True. But I don't think anybody wants to hear, myself included, how much time we wasted. Now, you're going to tell me, no, I don't have an obligation to learn all the time. You're right. I'm not making that claim. The claim is, I would think with all the garbage that we've seen and that we've watched, and that maybe, God forbid, we'll continue to see, doesn't that have an effect on me and my psyche and my spiritual side? It does. And that may stop me from learning. That may that may cause me to speak Lashon Hara. Different thing. You're going to say, well, non-Jews not obligated. Isn't it true non-Jews not obligated in Lashon Hara? They're not obligated. But let me ask you the million-dollar question. There are a lot of things non-Jews are not obligated in, but we said, what about a moral imperative? Does that make me a better non-Jew or not? Speaking Lashon Hara.
Yeah, that's situational.
It's more than situational. It's not just you're in a certain situation. Let's say you're outside the situation and think, oh, look what this guy did. Look what this person said. And then you sit there and destroy them, which they probably do deserve to be destroyed, right? You're not going to be liable for that. But my point is that doesn't have a good effect on you. In other words, that opens you up to be speaking about others when it's forbidden, and all that. You're going to say, but that still doesn't affect me because I'm not obligated. Okay. Even if you're not obligated in any of these things, I'm going to ask the million-dollar question. Did that make me right now? Does that make me a better person? Does that make me closer to God? And the answer unequivocally is going to be no. That's going to be the answer. So you're going to say, but I'm not liable. Doesn't matter if you're not liable. We are, either we're going up or we're going down in spiritual terms. Nobody is staying neutral like Switzerland. And if a person can say, I've heard many times, I'm good. I don't need to, I don't need to work hard on this. I'm going to be like an Orthodox Jew. I'm good. Yeah. In God's eyes, are you good? You keep Shabbos? You keep Shabbos? I'm conservative. That wasn't my question. Do you keep Shabbos the way it should? Show me why conservative Judaism is right and Orthodoxy is not. Well, not everyone was supposed to be Orthodox. Oh, really? 250 years ago, everybody was. Up until 200 years ago. Some more, some less, but pretty much everybody was. So that's not the answer. Show me in the Torah where I can pick and choose. I just want to do what I want to do. But don't tell me I want to be mediocre. God's not going to be happy with someone being mediocre. He wants them to strive. They'll make mistakes, whatever. He wants them to work hard. So now, even for a non-Jew, I'm going to throw the book at all non-Jews here listening. And that'll be worse than my tissue comments, right? So I'm going to throw the book over here, and say that, non-Jews got to learn also. They got to learn. Can't just listen to anybody. You want to be a better non-Jew? Learn Musar. Learn Jewish ethics. Learn. Be a better person. Be closer to God. That's why these laws are universal. You want to make excuses to me, and to others why, I think this is okay, and your moral imperative, you can chuck it out the window. You're right. I can chuck it out the window. And you can say it doesn't apply. You can say I don't have to do it. But I want to ask, if you watch Tom and Jerry, or as they would say in Israel, Tom and Jerry, right? You want to watch Tom and Jerry. Very entertaining. Very entertaining. Any cartoon, right?
Yeah.
A lot of good cartoons out there over the years. Very entertaining. What values are we getting from it? The Simpsons. Are we getting good values?
Family Guy. There's some trash there.
Are we getting good values? People watch it. Seinfeld, one of the greatest, quote unquote, the highest rated shows of all time. You know what the show was about? Nothing. That was the claim. It was about nothing. People loved it because it was about nothing. Now, person watches that. How many bad things? I just mentioned cartoons. Forget about TV and movies. Bad language, sexual innuendos, if not, graphic sex or whatever. These things are negative, have a negative effect because it goes against Torah. Every single movie out there anybody watches is going to be against Torah. The messages are going to be bad, right? In general. They're going to be bad, but they're entertaining. You're right. They're fun, right? They're violent, true. There's immorality, true. There's bad language, true. So what'd you gain? The effect is negative. Totally negative. No one's going to put a positive in. I can watch Doctor Who. I don't even know if he's still alive. Yeah, did you watch him? No. I can watch the History Channel. Okay. Did you watch it? No. So all these other things, sports talk radio, anti-talk radio, 99.9% of it, what is it? Lashon Hara fest. Oh, this guy's a loafer. He's getting paid all this money. Lashon Hara. Pure Lashon Hara. All across the board, right? You listen to the news. All you're getting is Lashon Hara in the news. This person said this person said against it. It's all Lashon Hara, right? It's all Lashon Hara over here. So, what do you say? I can't listen to the news? Like a friend of mine would say, if there's going to be a war, I'll find out about it. I have to sit there and waste my time listening to the news. You give me 10 minutes, I'll give you the world. You get the same news over and over because you might miss something. Oh, I didn't really think he was going to jump the first time. And he jumped again. I can't believe it. He jumped the third time. Same thing. Right? Everything's instantaneous. Right? So you're going to say, Rabbi, that's great. For Jews, all this stuff's forbidden. Right? In general. So, but a non-Jew, you're going to say, well, it's not really forbidden. Maybe them watching,
but not beneficial.
Sex, and, different things. That might be forbidden. But these other things affect the soul. They affect who we are. It dulls the spirit,
sure, so
to speak. What would you rather do? Watch this movie Dune for 2.5 hours. People say it's the greatest thing that ever came out, and all this, or would you rather, listen to Musar, and listen to Torah for 2 hours? What's easier to go in? We all know what the answer is, right? And that's the temptation. It's an unbelievable temptation, this generation. It's a temptation of just sitting back and being a vegetable and being a couch potato and not thinking for yourself. That's this generation. You could say it's previous generations also, just not as much. Could very well be. Even when it's barely TV, people listen on the radio. When TV finally came out, watching Abbott and Costello, watching the Stooges, other things. That slapstick is hilarious. I'm not going to say not. I grew up on that. It's hilarious, right? Beneficial? Does it make me a better person? No, it doesn't. First of all, it doesn't make me a better person. Second of all, it has a negative effect. Why? Because the images are there forever. The images don't disappear unless you really work hard to make it disappear. So the question is, we said at the beginning of the show, damage control. How much damage control can I do to myself? But what's the problem? If we want to work on it, it's very hard to work on. Not only that, this world's a world of distraction. And it's all fantasy. Someone will watch a movie and say, oh.
Delusion, yeah.
They'll say, I can't believe they killed him. No, they didn't kill him. It's make-believe.
Yeah, the character's fiction.
They're probably having a drink in some bar somewhere, getting wasted, right? They didn't die. No, but it was terrible. Sometimes they'll put out things, tear jerkers and what this person had to go through. Look what his parents did.
I don't know if you ever watched the old Star Trek from the '60s, Rabbi.
Right.
You knew when McCoy and Scotty and Spock and Kirk went down. The fifth guy that was with him, whoever he was the guy that was getting it.
Right. Yeah. No, the again, I'm not saying entertainment's not interesting. I'm not saying it's fun. It's got no, if we're looking at things at face value, at things that are good for my soul and not good for my soul, no one in their right mind, I'm going to say because they're not in their right mind, is going to be able to justify what they see. They can't justify
video games. Video games are even worse.
Video games another issue, right? Also, it's just a waste of time. It's fun. I grew up with Pong. You remember Pong with Atari?
Oh, I know, but now there are whole worlds where you're running around in an entire world.
Right. When I was growing up and I was in camp, the big thing was Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if you remember Dungeons and Dragons. I was never into that game or whatever. When video games came up, that was a whole different world. You had Donkey Kong, you had Pac-Man, you had Asteroid.
Zelda back in the 80s.
Today it's a whole different world.
Yeah.
It's a whole different world. And there are people just live for this stuff, even when they're older. They just, it doesn't get out of their system. Some more, some less, whatever it is. But if we are growing spiritual people, these things should never have a place. Never. Never. Not TV, not movies, not nothing. Why? They're going to say, come on, this is fanaticism 101. That's why people listen to me. See what's going to come out of my mouth, right? Why is it fanaticism? Because people don't want to hear it. People don't want to hear what I see affects me. And of course it affects you. You just don't know how far it does. See, all this stuff, all this impurity, that's what it is. It sticks to you. That's what it says by tuma. It says by impurity. The Torah says that it sticks to you like glue. That's the language, right? Use the language for devek,
like
right? Davak, that it attaches to you. The word devek in modern Hebrew means glue. It sticks to the soul. Right? Torah doesn't stick to the soul. Torah, you have to work hard to remember. Right? If I would sing, and I've mentioned this many, many times. If I were to say certain jingles in the States, from commercials in the 70s, I'd say a few bars, everyone can sing.
Plop, fizz, fizz.
That's it, right? Something like that.
What a relief it is.
Right? Roto-Rooter, that's the name, right? Whatever. Like, plenty of things. People can say verbatim. If I ask you, by the way, what did Rashi, say on this, this week's Parsha on, a certain verse? Said, wait a minute, wasn't he a shortstop for the Blue Jays? Like, what are you talking about? Like, Torah, you have to work hard. Torah, you have to review, and it may not always be exciting. As much as we try and make it a little bit interesting, and exciting. Non-Jews are no different over here. The way the soul works might be different and all that. But what they see, how can they see it doesn't affect them? Of course it affects them. Images. There are people put up posts. Then they say, well, what was the scariest movie you ever watched as a kid? And how did it affect you? People will say Halloween. People will say Poltergeist. People will say Chucky, those stupid doll or whatever, some of those movies. Nightmare on Elm Street. They'll say, what do you call it with the, the goalie mask? What's his name? Jason. From whatever, all these things, right? And they said, wow, I watched this and I was like scared out of my mind, and to this day, like I'm always spooked out by certain. It has an effect, why? The whole thing is make believe. The whole thing is make believe, right? Even Jason with the goalie mask, make believe, right? Never happened, doesn't exist. Oh, but all the blood and all. So why are you afraid of it? Because the image is in your mind. The image is in your head. It doesn't go away. All these things. And I don't need to mention just there's horror movies. You can mention anything. I can remember, I'll give an example. 1975 World Series, right? Game 6, Carlton Fisk. Anyone who remembers, right? Hits a long drive, right? And he wants to make sure it's going fair. It's going to be a home run, win the game. And he's going like this. Anyone who can see, he's going like this, that it should be a fair ball. I can see it like it was yesterday. Why should I have that image? Why should that image be with me? Because it's there. And 100% it's there. I can tell you what Mikey still looks like as a kid when he ate Life cereal. Hey, Mikey, he likes it, right? They say he died by eating Pop Rocks, right? I don't think that was true. But, all these stupid things, all these Bud Light commercials. I could go on. All the stupidity, all the stupidity. Why is that all there? And I haven't thought about this stuff in, who knows what. But why is it all there? Because your soul recorded it. See, that's one good thing about Torah. Even if you forget it, you don't have to you remember. Your soul is going to remember. So your soul is going to be able to spit back that Torah that God's going to ask if you learn Torah. So is a non-Jew any different in this case? No. Because the more you see, the more you're affected. Now, the question is how far a person gets affected. Now, you might say, Rabbi, this is great. What a great Musar idea. But I don't have these obligations that a Jew does. I'm not going to be liable for a death penalty doing these things. I'm probably not going to be liable for most things that you're talking about. You're right. You're right. So Jews have a bigger responsibility. It's a lot harder. I agree 100%. My question is, what do you want your Olam Haba, your portion of the next world to look like? Do you want to be sitting, at the 50-yard line? You want to have, box seats where you can see everything? Or you want to be in the back of the end zone and you can't see anything and you're dust under the feet of the righteous? Right now, that's worth something. Right? Because if you're not at the game, if you're not at the game, you're not at the game. But at least you're dust under the feet of the righteous. You can't really see much, probably not hear much, but at least you're there. I remember the old Boston Garden. The old Boston Garden had an obstructed view seat. The person sitting there is like looking behind a wall like this and like that. And so the person's going to say, what? You're paying $20 a game for 40 games a year, let's say. I'll buy $20 today. American, not Canadian, right? So imagine, the guy's got an obstructed view seat. He's got a bent neck and it's like this watching the game. Where's everyone else watching the game? They're at home. But he was there watching them win championships. He's going to say, but I was at the game. I'm hunched over. I got a stiff neck. I had to get up and stretch all the time, this, that. But he was there at the game, right? If you're not at the game, you ain't at the game. You're outside. You're nowhere, right? Doesn't matter if you're watching it, right? But at Olam Haba, if you don't get there, you don't get there. So we make the bed that we lie in. You don't prepare Erev Shabbos, the Gemara says. You don't eat on Shabbos, right? You don't prepare in this world. You don't have a portion. You don't have a portion in the next world. But, this is for all of us, myself included, and that is, what are we looking at? Where's my focus during the day? Where am I have to think about this. I can't just go through the motions. If I go through the motions, I'm spiritually dead, which is most of the Jewish people today, unfortunately. Most people are spiritually dead. Most important question they may ever ask, do I put ketchup or mustard on a hot dog? That's where they're holding. Ketchup. I said, what about relish? Oh, relish. I didn't think about that. Most people don't care. They're not interested. Fine. That's their choice. But if we are spiritual people, and our goal is to be close to God, Jew or non-Jew, we're not going to discriminate here. Non-Jews are not off the hook. They may not be liable for any of this stuff. So you're going to say, so why are you harping on this for so long? Because if a person does certain things and they're affected by what they see, then you take people you mentioned before. You mentioned before about video games. When people are addicted to video games or they're addicted to movies, they don't think the same. A son-in-law of mine told me a story. He said if he's learning with someone, he knows that person watched a movie, he can tell straight away. Now, he has to be very perceptive, very bright. But he said because their mind's not there. They're not thinking. Because their mind wanders. He said, well, the mind can wander for other things.
Or worst are the people whose entire theology is based on what they saw in movies.
Also, people make, I'm not going to go necessarily that far then. People make their lives
let's just take, say, the 10 Commandments, for example. A lot of people see, or the 56 movie on the Bible, a lot of people see that is their version of early Genesis. Same with the Exodus. That's the way they see it, exactly as it was portrayed by Charlton Heston.
You're right, but most people who see it, and even if they see it that way, how much are they really thinking about what they saw? I would say probably not. There's probably, take someone like Charlton Heston. He also played John the Baptist, right? He also played John the Baptist in a movie cover both sides.
Planet of the Apes as well.
Yeah, I'm saying he played Moses and he played John the Baptist, so he wanted to cover all things. But even whatever they saw, I would love to believe that people who watch the Ten Commandments say, "Hey, that's not the way it went in the Bible." I would like people to ask the question a little bit deeper, but they're not. It makes them feel better. Makes them feel Jewish. And what's the most famous film of all time for secular Jews to watch? Fiddler on the Roof. The most famous film. If I were a rich man. Whatever.
Yeah, I actually seen that this year again.
So Fiddler on the Roof is a movie about assimilation. That's what it's about. It's glorifying.
The whole story.
It's glorifying about assimilation, leaving the old world, the new world, whatever, all these things.
Yeah.
But if you ask any Jew, how many times they've seen it? They've seen it many times, right? And that's how they relate. They see things with Jewish themes. Shtisel. How many people watch Shtisel, right? A lot of Jews getting their education from that, right? You got a woman who went off as an Orthodox Jew. Now she's got a famous thing on Netflix, bashing the ultra-Orthodox community, making a lot of money. Where are Jews getting their information from? Something like that. Say, see, look at what she's saying. Yeah, but that's one bad egg. She could have had a bad experience. Okay. But that doesn't mean everyone else is like that. There are tens of thousands of women very happy being ultra-Orthodox women. They don't find the same things that she found. Okay. Someone sent me, said, "Oh, did you ever read this book?" And I saw the book. It was an expose by an Hasidic Jew. Okay, he's going to have an axe to grind. I get it. Totally going to have an axe to grind. So, secular Jews are going to get their information from these type of things. And they're going to read bad books with Jewish themes that make us look bad, right, in general. So it's very hard, to undo the damage, so to speak. But, that makes an impression. Totally makes an impression. What we see makes an impression. Right? Now, we're talking about non-Jews here. For sure, for Jews, it's going to affect. But why shouldn't it affect non-Jews? Foul language, that doesn't affect a non-Jew when they hear it. Right? It should affect them. They shouldn't speak foul language. Certainly Jews shouldn't speak foul language. Right? Not allowed to curse. Certainly not allowed to curse. But even if you tell me it's a moral imperative, it doesn't make you a better person by cursing. Right? No question. So, non-Jews are not off the hook here. And we have to realize all these things. And, I could go on for days giving parables, sports, and TV, movies, all these things, all these great things I'm an expert in. Right? Whatever it is, did that make me a better person? No. But it could be, yeah. You had to see all these things so you could quote it. Quote it here, quote it in Tanakh, quote it in other places. But the reality is, images we see have an effect. If the images we see have an effect, what people do that we see have an effect. Language has an effect. So if all these things have an effect over here, then how can a person say, well, there's nothing wrong with it? There's no possible way. A person can say with a straight face. I mean, they could be lying. They could be lying. But they could not say with a straight face. They could not say at all, this is purely good, there's nothing wrong with it. Except that maybe you'll say, for a Jew, when they could have been learning Torah, they're wasting their time doing this. No, that's not the only effect.
On the opposite side of the spectrum, can you say it's
totally opposite side?
Wicked.
Bad language, it's immorality, besides the fact of waste, many, many things. Right? Someone going to tell me, a movie in general, not with a Jewish theme, that a movie in general has, good morals? I don't think so. Certainly not not the vast majority. Not going to have good morals, per se. Even if the good guy wins in the end. Oh, they're,
all the Marvel comic book movies out now.
Whatever. You got all these things. People
came
getting
out of the 60s, 70s, yeah, you read
people
comics.
getting killed, people are merciless, different things, the values.
Fantasy.
Yeah, it's not just fantasy. The values are bad. So if the values are bad and it has a negative effect, then nobody should be watching this stuff. Nobody. There's no benefit over here. Just the opposite. It's negative. So we're no different than good old Uncle Asa. We're willing to throw our portion of the world to come, in the garbage because we want to have a little bit of fun. Now, no one's going to argue, so you're going to say, you mentioned this many times before. So what are we supposed to do over here? What? My brain doesn't function 24/7. Can't learn Torah all the time. So you have to have a certain amount of time to learn. But you have to find other things to do. Plenty of things you can read.
Wholesome, healthy.
That have good values. Now, again, that doesn't mean you don't spend time with family. You got to do that as well. So you have to have a balance. You have to have a balance. But
what about hobbies, Rabbi? Like my spouse does a lot of puzzles to kill time.
Now, technically, there's probably nothing wrong with it. Hobbies in general, keeps people busy, etc. But, keeps people busy, maybe, hopefully, out of trouble. People, let's say, like to garden. So if you're not doing anything wrong, if you're not doing anything forbidden in gardening, let's say by putting two species together, taking a peach and a plum and making a nectarine and all that, right? So if you didn't transgress, that prohibition, they say, okay, gardening is good, reading is good. It depends what it is, right? It depends what it is. But see, this is the whole thing. If, we're not going to talk about Christians. Christians have their own issue, right? But if we're going to talk about, Noahide, you can say, if they have good hobbies, fine. They don't have an obligation to learn all the time, right? That's for sure. So so if it's something that's wholesome, they're not getting bad values for it, technically shouldn't be anything wrong with it. Shouldn't be anything wrong with it. Depends, it depends, it depends what it is. If it's something wholesome, good. There's value there. If I would say if there's no value, then it's probably a waste of time. But if there is value, let's say a person needs to relax. They relax by drawing. They relax by coloring. They relax by nothing wrong with that. Right? Totally nothing wrong with that. Even for a Jew, if they can't concentrate or whatever, they need to like unwind a little bit. If it's a kosher thing, exercise. I remember one of my kids needed, just needed to like throw a ball around or whatever, and do that. So, there was a gym night for girls, when I was in New Jersey, and I was in Lakewood. So, some people need that. I'm not going to say
yet some are obsessed. Yeah.
Yeah. And then some get obsessed by it, whatever. I was up north this week. So I was telling somebody up there, I said, people can buy a house and get land, whatever. I said, this would be great. I said, put up a hardtop, put up a basketball court. I said, I'm going to show everybody up. I said, I'll show all my talents that I used to have. Right. So, if it's something competitive compared to what the non-Jews do, that's a problem. If it's for exercise, whatever, just, person gets out and they run around and, sweat up a little bit. And another, if it's exercise, fine. But if it's getting caught up, in a person, when I was growing up, so I was always on a court, I was always on a basketball court, shooting this, that, you get obsessed. You can easily get obsessed.
Oh, yeah. I remember when I was 12, that's all I did day and night.
Playing sports or whatever. So, okay, if you're doing it for exercise, you're doing it to get out, that's good, right? It's very good to, even though exercise may be a
ball handling or your shot, yeah.
Right. Exercise may be a four-letter word in, certain communities. But at the same time, exercise, not a bad thing. Depends what you're doing. Competitive sports may be a different issue. Even some may say, well, there's really nothing wrong with it, technically. Right, technically. But, a person can get carried away with it. Can totally get carried away with it. So, any of these things, if, you say, well, I'm not going to abuse it. I'm not going to get caught up in it. Technology is very addictive. Very, very addictive. Yeah. Right? Whether it comes to, you mentioned before, you talk about video games. these things, they're interactive. It's well beyond what I grew up with. Well beyond, what I grew up with. So,
Oh, yeah.
You just get into it. You role play. But a lot of these things, the vast majority that I see people that are on it or whatever, I'm not talking about Candy Crush. They're violent. They're extremely violent.
Oh, yeah.
But it's
Third person, first person shooter games where
exactly
you're just running around killing. Yeah.
You got these other games where, you can pick up women, you marry them, whatever. There's a lot of other things.
Or you're running them over.
Exactly, right. There are a lot of other things going on that's, I get it, people, why do you think, in general, some people, have issues of aggression? You're going to say, well, they're born with it. Yeah, they may be born with it to a certain extent.
They nurture it.
They nurture it. Yeah, that's it. That's it 100%. And these things have an effect. We can't, everybody will say that, that it absolutely can have an effect. No one's going to say it doesn't have an effect. I mean, no one in their right mind is going to say this, this never affects me. And I'm not affected by what I see. Well, unless you're brain dead, how can you say that? How are you not affected? Someone once told me, I think I mentioned this before, we'll keep this PG-13 so we don't get thrown off the Roku network. And that is that someone told me, so listen, if you go to a beach, a mixed beach, and you get excited, there's something wrong with you. Right? That's what they said to me. And I said, if you don't, then there's something wrong with you. You can suppress it. It's the greatest urge, God gave to a person, right? In general, it's there to be harnessed, used in the right way, right? But, at the same time, the more we act on negative things, and that we're going to see in the next part of the Mishna if we get there, right? The more wives, the more witchcraft. One of the things, that we're going to see is that, the more a person is involved in that type of thing, the weaker they become, right? Certainly for a guy, kill him. You kill him in different ways because, he just doesn't have that strength anymore. You do it over and over, weakens the person, right? No question, but you say, well, it's permissible. When it's permissible, it's permissible. Doesn't mean I'm allowed to abuse it, right? 100%. So, a person has to be careful. So even if something necessarily, is permissible, even for a Noahide, we'll call it a moral imperative. Even if it's permissible, what's my question? My question is, should I be doing it? Now, as we said before, if we're affected by what we see, and we're affected by what we do, then why do some people in general are going so far off the deep end doing, watching things or doing other things, exponentially? What's the answer? The answer is A, because it's fun, B, because it's enjoyable, and C, it's because that's where my evil inclination's taking me. Now, we also mentioned if I do something wrong, let's say, and I blow it off, and I justify it, and I do it again. By the third time I do it, I already think it's okay. Right? That becomes part of me. Once it becomes part of me, we've said a lot. Once it becomes part of me,
yeah.
It's very hard to change. The more you act on it, the harder it is to change. So in this case, back to, Torah, it goes in a circle here, right? We're speaking about this idea, the more possessions, the more worry, right? However you want to slice it, we just said, you're going to be worried. Well, we said a while ago that you're going to be worried because the more you have, the more you want. The more, if I have 100, I want 200. If I have 200, I want 400. The more I have, if I don't have a proper perspective on it, then what happens? It spirals out of control. Then I have to keep up with the Joneses. Then I have to work all kinds of hours because I want to make more money. And I want to do this. It's crumb. It's wrong. That mentality is 100% wrong. Just like we asked the question, if someone asked this rabbi, am I allowed to work longer hours to give more charity? No. You work what you have to do. The rest of the time, either you're learning, you're helping others, you're dealing with your family, whatever it is, but you want to have positive interaction. If I'm caught up in my money, and I'm caught up, like someone told me there's an adage in this world, today, that someone is in their 60s. What do they say? Go. Like, go visit, go travel, this, that. If you're in your 70s, slow go. Right? You take it easy because, you're not as young, whatever. 80s is no go. 80s, like, you're not going to travel because, again, you're older, you don't know what it's going to be. Right? But what does that tell you? What does that mentality tell you? You say, okay, I retired in my 60s, let's say. Right? That's what I'm thinking of, retired in their 50s. Fine. They retire, so now they want to see the world. They want to, within reason, and see other things. So now, they're relatively young. So they're gonna see, they're gonna go, they're gonna do whatever, right? They don't have any, let's say, any health limitations. Fine. But what are they telling you? So in your 60s, you got to be cautious, right? In your 60s, shouldn't be a problem, right? If you have no health issues, not a problem. You should be able to go see and do pretty much what you want. In your 70s, you got to be careful. Why? Because now you're older, you're more fragile, different things. Could be. Person's very strong, no health issues, minimal health issues, fine. When you're in the 80s, no, that's when it stops. Right? Then you don't go as far, you don't do as many things because, you got to be extra careful. So, what does that mentality teach you? That mentality teach you is you get the most out of life you can. You know when you can go, when you can't go, what you can do, what you can't do, what your limitations are. The whole point is, I'm going to enjoy life now. I worked, I earned it, whatever, I'm going to enjoy life. Is that what life is about? When I was in college, I was convinced, you do good in high school, to go to a good college, you go to college, hopefully do well, get a job, you get married, have a couple kids, maybe retire, whatever, see what you can see, and then you die. That's a very, really skewed way of looking at the world. Now that being the case, that's how, a lot of people are going to live if they have that opportunity, right? If they live that long, and they're healthy enough and they have money, within reason, that's what they're going to do. That's what life is. So they're going to say, no, people have more ambitions. They want to do charitable things. They want to do other things, maybe, right? Maybe that will be the case. I'm not going to say everybody's like that. There are a lot of shallow people out there, but, they'll do things that are quote unquote meaningful to them. Now, what is meaningful? Meaningful maybe going on a trip every couple of months. Meaningful maybe, I don't know, helping out different organizations, volunteering. Okay, there can be legitimate things. Not going to say they're not necessarily legitimate. Probably a lot of them are not. Right? But if that's the case, what are they living for? They have family, they want to have grandkids, this, that. What are they living for? They're living to travel. They're living to, whatever. Whatever it is. So the values that we're talking about, Torah values, have to be where I'm growing spiritually. They have to be where I'm going in the right direction. Anything that will take me in the wrong direction is like taking 5 steps backwards. By the end of the year, you've taken 1,500, 3,000, a billion steps backwards. You know how hard that is to fight? So you're going to say, but who can focus all the time on spirituality? I didn't say it was easy. But I want people to understand. Non-Jews not off the hook here. They might not be liable for things that, imagine if you became a Jew. Got to control my thoughts. Can't speak Lashon Hara. Got to pray 3 times a day if you're a guy. I mean, you got to be on top of things. And you got to be learning. You got to be always growing. It's not so easy in this world. Not so easy at all. So non-Jews don't have that obligation. So you're going to say, okay, I don't have that obligation. Cut me a lot of slack. Stop yelling at me over here. And I want people to understand. And I want people to understand what they're up against. Because if you allow this activity to continue, then you'll never grow spiritually. You grow maybe very, very small increments.
Or it's like, tying a cinder block to your leg and trying to go
You're
swimming
right.
in
And
a deep
you're
lake.
going to say, Rabbi, that's great. That's a great message. How do you implement it? We implement it by changing our mentality. We have to change our mentality. Changing our mentality, how do we start? We start by realizing, what are my obligations? What are my obligations to God? What are my obligations in this world? Right? And if there are things that are going to affect me in a negative way, and we understand what many of them are, then I have to stay away from them. But you're going to say, Rabbi, come on. It's already part of my psyche. It's so hard. Tell anyone who grew up as a sports fan to give it up cold turkey. Not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And even if they give it up gradually, they still have this inkling that, let me just see where the stats are. Let me just see who's doing what. Why? Because it's interesting. It's part of your psyche. So, tell a smoker, even though they may die in 2 weeks if they keep it up or whatever, tell them they have to stop cold turkey. Now, they might have to anyway. Right? It's very hard. Why? Because these things are addictive. Anyone who's into social media, we'll throw social media in there. I didn't mention that. Social media, very addictive. Very, very addicting. Instagram, Facebook, very addictive. Very addictive. And a lot of the things you're seeing out there are not worth anything. Waste of time. Most likely, what a lot of people are posting. I would like to, someone say, I only post good things. Okay. But most people don't. They post all kinds of stupid things that no one should see. Who cares? Right? It doesn't really matter. But, you tell someone to go cold turkey. Someone to go cold turkey, let's say, they've been posting for a long time, on Instagram, on Mayway, or whatever, MeWe, whatever it's called, on Facebook, these other things, it's addicting, So anything that's addictive is bad, right? It's going to be bad. These other things, once it becomes so part of you, see, that's the problem. When it comes to impurity, it so sticks to you like glue. I'm not going to say impossible. It's very, very hard to fight against. It makes it almost impossible. It's almost like you have two hands tying behind your back, and you're fighting an uphill battle. So a person can say, okay, I'll watch less. You try and cut it out. A person watched an hour a day, you watch, 50 minutes. Or you watch 45 minutes. You do that over time. And then you watch a little bit less than that. Then you watch a little bit less than that. So finally, it doesn't have an effect. But it's going to take time. It's going to take time, especially something that's addictive. But we have to understand the mentality that what we see not only affects us, has a negative effect. And if you think it doesn't have a negative effect, you're wrong. It has a totally negative effect because images are there. All I have to do is say, what does Jason look like? Friday the 13th, what does he look like? You're going to say a tall guy with a baseball mask. Sorry, with a hockey mask. Right? Freddy Krueger, what does he look like? You're going to say, okay, he's got this glove on with these. We know. We know. And we've seen people die, have their heads chopped off, thrown off of buildings, all kinds of things. We may not have thought about it. It's there. So you're going to say, what? That makes me so negative? That makes me so violent? Doesn't mean you're necessarily going to act on it. Right? It has an effect. Psychologists will tell you, clear as day, these things have effect. Whether they manifest themselves, how they manifest themselves, that's a whole discussion. Right? That's a whole discussion over here. But you can't say it doesn't affect. Right? That would be an outright lie. Right? That would be a total lie over here. It definitely affects. Right? Totally affect. There are some people, let's say there are certain things. There are certain things, not only are they so affected by it, they just can't stop talking about it. Now, it could be totally forbidden. It could be totally forbidden. That a person shouldn't be speaking about it, but you know what? They're just so into it doesn't matter. They're just like, they have to speak about it. There, you get people that forget about sports. They're into politics. I didn't even mention about politics. People get so into politics, they think, I have an obligation to speak about it all the time. Well, okay. Anything good about politics? No. They're all a bunch of liars, every one of them. They're all a bunch of liars and thieves and con artists and different things. Some of them may be a little bit better, some worse. Who cares? So you got to say, but it affects me. It affects, who I vote for and how it affects others and blah, blah, blah. Fine. I have to be up to date on what's going on. And the whole thing. My Rabbi beat this into my head years ago. I used to be very much in Israeli politics. And he says, listen, if you're happy the way God runs the world 95% of the time, in 10 lifetimes, in my language, doesn't matter. You'll never understand it anyway. So who cares? You think the right wing should do this and that and, and whatever. So he said, go sit and learn. What are you wasting your time for? It's useless. What are you wasting your time for? God runs the world. God's going to put into power who he wants to put into power. Fine. But it can have this ramification, that ramification. Fine. There's certain things that will affect you. True? So at the end of the day, so what? So what? It's interesting. Politics here, very interesting in Israel. I don't think there's any question. But who cares? Does that make me a better Jew? A better Jew wannabe? A better Noahide? I see people go off on tangents all the time. Political things here, political things there. So I can tell you, okay, if it's something that comes up, bring it up here, bring it up there. But in the bigger scheme of things, does it really mean a whole lot? In general, I should sit there and waste my time? Or if I'm learning with someone, you speak about politics? We're gonna see in the next millennium 2 people sitting learning Torah. And you say, wow, what a beautiful tree. You're liable for death penalty. Death penalty! He deserved to die. So we're going to explain over there when I'm probably like 78 or something. We're going to explain, if I'm still on this show, right? We're still going to explain, very simple. Why? God's going to say, wow, I'm so glad you praised my creation. But the problem was you were learning Torah. And if you're learning Torah, why are you praising my creation while you're learning Torah? That's a waste of time. You should have been concentrating on what you were learning. But you're going to say, but I praised you. Someone told me about a meteorite shower and you can see Saturn. Wow, it's beautiful. What an unbelievable thing. Niflaos haboire. The great things of God in the world. Tremendous. What does that have to do with I'm learning about an ox goring another ox? What does that have to do with with what I'm learning at hand? Nothing. I'm not talking about politics. Imagine that. You're in the middle of learning and imagine something about politics. God's going to say, why are you mentioning politics? What does that have to do with what you're learning? That I could understand. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say liable for death penalty. I'd be nicer. I wouldn't zap someone for that. Per se. But I understand. You're in the middle of learning. And then you say, oh, I saw this great thing on the CFL. You're dead. Boom. It's over. What do you mention CFL? You're talking about God over here. How could you mention CFL, politics, any of these things? It's a serious thing, right? Because we say 2 people learning, God's presence is there, even if you have 2, seemingly even if you have 1. So why does your mind go astray? Because it's a problem. There's a disconnect between the brain and the heart. You can be learning by yourself and your mind wanders, right? I'm not necessarily talking about something forbidden. If it's something forbidden, it's even worse. But even if it's not something forbidden, all I'm doing is praising God. That's all I'm doing. What's the negativity? Says the Mishna in Pirkei Avos. Says the Mishna over there, liable for death.
Wow.
Now, Dan Farwell, somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, is going to say, Rabbi, that's not fair. That's really out there. You're learning God's Torah, learn His Torah. Don't speak about extraneous things, even if it's praising God. Right? You say, what, I can't eat when I'm learning? No, you can't eat. You can make blessings. Right? But you got to focus on what you're doing. You can't lose sight of what you're doing. Even if it's praising God's creation, all the more so, if you're saying something that's totally irrelevant to what you're learning. If you're making a point and you say, oh, this is like this and this is like that, and you want to make a comparison, it's one thing. Right? Even if it's something that's, I wouldn't normally speak about, let's say when you're learning. Maybe you shouldn't be speaking about it when you're not learning. Right? But I'm pointing out, you're praising God over here. You're saying, how great He is. So you're going to say that's so bad? Why is that so bad? How have I More people should be praising God for his works and all the things that he does. Gives us air and water and food and all these beautiful things. That's 100% true. But when you're learning something, you're not praising God over here. That's not what you should be doing. Now, you want to tell me you brought in politics? You brought on social media what someone tweeted in the middle of learning God's law? Oh, that is, that is going to be pretty bad. Right? The punishment certainly could be the death penalty. If the death penalty would be, for someone who said how beautiful God's creation is, imagine what the punishment would be. It would be the same, be no different, be worse probably. If a person started speaking about social media, if a person started speaking about, about politics, or sports, or entertainment, or any of these things. I'll make it, as we're ending here, I'll draw another analogy. Where's the person learning over here? Let's say they're learning in the synagogue. Let's say they're learning in a study hall. Now, there's certain decorum, certainly in a synagogue.
For sure.
You got to be careful, obviously, how you dress, obviously, how you speak. You walk into a synagogue, the ark is right in front of you, right? You're sitting, 5 rows behind the ark. What's in the ark? The Holy Torah scroll. And you're sitting there speaking about politics in front of the Torah in a synagogue? Speaking in synagogue. I didn't even mention in the middle of prayer. In the middle of prayer, it's worse. It's a lot worse. So some say that the Holocaust didn't affect Sephardic people in Sephardic lands because they were very fastidious in keeping to the decorum of a synagogue, much more than Ashkenazim were. So they weren't affected by that. They weren't affected by the Enlightenment, right, in general. But someone speaks while prayers are going on, let's say repetition of the Shemona Esrei, let's say, or something like that, where people have to listen, but they shouldn't be speaking about trivial things.
Interrupting.
Not only that, I was in the synagogue, where they're reading the Torah on Shabbos. And the rabbi has to bang on his lectern to get people to be quiet because it's hard to hear the person reading the Torah on Shabbos. They're going to say, I'm not going to say, it's so uncommon. Depends where, but there has to be a certain level of decorum. Now imagine God watching this. God says, wow, they're keeping my Sabbath. Very nice. They're reading the Torah in synagogue. Very nice. What's this chatter I hear? What are these words? Speaking about the upcoming game. You're speaking about, someone told me, went to a certain synagogue. They said, if you sit in this section, these are all the lawyers. You sit in this section, these are the doctors. This section, all the sports fans. This section, whatever. And, and where's the decorum over here? I'm not saying they can't sit together, right? But imagine God looking down and he sees the Torah being read. It's unbelievable. Thank God they're reading my Torah. They're doing it in a proper way. And then he looks down and he says, why are they speaking about this stuff? This is the holiest book in the world. This is the Holy Torah scroll. They're speaking about what happened in the World Series. They're speaking about, this law verdict or whatever. While the Torah is being read, you got an obligation to hear it. It's when people are talking, you got a problem. You have to hear it. So, I would hope most synagogues not like that. That, Torah is being read, everyone's quiet, which it should be. But the decorum in the synagogue, multiplying by infinity. How careful you have to be. So, I guess, that'll be my depressing end message, over here is that we have to be careful what we do on a regular basis. On a minute by minute basis. And if the evil inclination gets us, we have to fight it tooth and nail. We can't be in the throw of the evil inclination and just toss it around. We have to develop ways to try and snag it, try and make sure, it doesn't affect us.
Yeah.
But Rabbi, you're going to say, come on, Say something positive. What about all the years of all the garbage I steeped on my soul? Oh, you're toast. Well, it's been a great show. Now, you've got to start somewhere. You have to change your mentality. When you change your mentality even a little bit, doesn't mean the inclination stops, right? But the more I give into these other things, then that's going to have a positive effect on myself. Now you're going to say, but if I have free time, I want to watch this, I want to see this, the inclination really gets me. Okay, right? You got to take it. You got to take it step by step. You got to take it very slow. If you say, well, I can't do it, then it's no bother. Then you'll never do it. If I take it step by step, small step by small step, and I make it in a way where I'm able to do certain things, then it can have a positive effect. By heroin addict, you got no choice. You got to take them off it, give them meth and all that in order for them to survive, because the body will go out of whack. So some people like that, it's like, no, I have to watch another movie. I have to watch another thing, whatever. So you got to take it step by step, right? You watch a little bit less, whatever. But the problem is, the more you feed it, come on, Little Shop of Horrors, feed me, Seymour, feed me, right? The more you feed it, the harder it is to fight.
That's right.
Right. And that overcomes the psyche. That makes us who we are, and we're in trouble. So we have to try and nip it in the bud and stop it little by little. That's my positive message, for the end. So next week, we'll hit Mishna 8, part 6, all things
Hashem
good.
willing.
You never know. Hashem willing. Never know what's going to be, but we'll see. We'll definitely see. But this will be Mishna 8, part 6, and we're going to hopefully finish up this idea, the more possession, the more worry, and then get to maybe the next part about the more wives, the more witchcraft. So maybe we'll get there. Maybe we won't. We'll see. But that is the goal for next week. And I do want to mention tomorrow, 2:30 Eastern time, 9:30 at night, Israel time. Noahide law is going to be part 4. Right? We're gonna speak about certain terminology, some other things there as well. So you don't want to miss that.
Are you on for Tanakh Talk this week?
And Tanakh Talk, yeah, hopefully tomorrow, 12:30 Eastern time, 7:30 Israel time. Topic I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. But anyone who wants any of those previous classes, all you have to do is sign up on Noahide Nation to set up an account, and you should be able to click on there about an hour, a little more than a little bit more than an hour. So anyone wants to sign up for them. The classes are free, enjoy, and I'm going to give that class tomorrow as well.
Bless you, Rabbi, for all you do. We hope everything's going well for you in up the north there, north of Jerusalem, right? You're still taking the bus and teaching classes up there?
Yeah, doing that. They actually might want to start another class on Derech Hashem, the way of God. We're going to see, maybe give a class in Jewish philosophy as well. We're going to, I don't know, we'll see what happens next week. We're still continuing with the laws of judges in laws of damages. So we're going to certainly continue with that. A little bit easier than other parts of the laws of damages. But yeah, I'm working hard, and got other people working behind the scenes. So hopefully, get more things going up there. But like anything else, definitely definitely takes time, and it's a good thing I can sleep on buses. So otherwise,
folks, it's just there you have it. You can always reach out to Rabbi Coffman at his website, orthodoxconversion.com, or his YouTube page.
Facebook, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism, or you can send me a friend request because I got locked out of my other site at Michael Chaim Coffman. You can find me there as well.
On Facebook, yeah. Well, Rabbi, we hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week, and thanks again for sharing with us about what we have potential to achieve and to be on guard against pitfalls. Thank you so much. It's always a joy to hear that light of Torah coming out of the nation of Israel, just making the world a better place, and we thank you for it. So have a wonderful, wonderful week, everybody. We'll be back next week, same time. I got to get ready for my next class in 25 minutes with Rabbi Aaron David Poston. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.